about some data, some privacy, and understanding your players. So I'm Brian Larson. I've been in the industry a decade. Some ad tech, some before there was even a mobile phone, and stumbled my way into a research company. So that's kind of me. I've been helping partners like yourself, and I think we started talking, like I said, a couple of years ago. So I'd love to hear from you a little about yourself, your background, and then I guess we can kick things off and start talking about Supersonic, because I know it's got a great long history to cover as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, I mean, as you say, we've been talking and working together for a couple of years, but Supersonic goes back way back. We actually started as a sort of home computer and console developer back in way back in the days of the NES and the Game Boy and the Game Gear. For years and years and years, that was our business, doing console games. We did PlayStation games and Xbox games and Nintendo games, PC games, all sorts. And we were partially a sort of work for hire developer, partly we'd come up with our own IP and sell it to publishers. About maybe 10 years ago, just as as smartphones were coming out, we pivoted to be a mobile developer, which was a big thing for us. It was going from a business that involved putting boxes on shelves for $40, $50 to very quickly games being completely free. So we got into free to play early on. We were actually originally we specialized in racing games. We did a lot of sort of fun racing games, things like Micro Machines. And our first developments on mobile were actually the Top Gear games for the BBC. But in parallel to that, we were doing puzzle games, and that's we started to get traction with that, and that quite quickly became the main focus of our business. And then shortly thereafter became the only focus of our business. We're now very much a puzzle game only company. We develop games very much as a service. We launch games and hope that they're on the App Store and have an audience that measures in years. Our two most successful games, Picture Cross, is actually about 6.5 years old now. Puzzle Page, which is our sort of baby, I think, is actually approaching 4. So we develop games as long-term services. We add new content all the time. We just try to engage the user for a long time to keep them interested.
That's a huge history there, going from pre-mobile and console to racing into the free-to-play, and then of course having a game for 6 years is huge, right? That's there was a big shift, I think, in the industry, going from build lots of new games to build a game that you can actually sustain over the long term. And I think having a game that's 6 years old is a testament to kind of staying ahead of the curve a little bit for Supersonics, which is great to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the market, there's obviously hyper casual, and there's very successful hyper casual publishers who are putting out lots and lots of games, and they don't necessarily have to survive on the in the market for very long. They shoot to the top and fall back down again. But the other side is there are plenty of very successful long-term games that have been around for longer than us, decade-long games.
Yeah, I may play a couple of those as well. So getting in a little bit more, what makes Supersonic special? Why or how have you kind of become successful with puzzle games? How have you even kept a game alive for 6+ years? And I love if you could share a little bit of the secret sauce there.
I think the App Store is it's a wonderful place. You can do absolutely anything on it, and there's a really low barrier to entry, which means there are millions of apps out there. But I think to be successful in that environment, it really pays to specialize. It really pays to know your stuff, and I think to know your subject, you have to stick at it for a while. You have to try things, you have to iterate, you have to study what works, what doesn't, and we've been doing that with puzzle games for, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so now. We launched a title called World's Biggest Word Search as our first thing, and we naively thought that you know, when we developed it, we were finished, you know, launch it and that's the game over. Back from, you know, sort of old days when that's how games worked. But you know, you realize that you put content in a game and you think, you know, there are dozens of hours of gameplay in this that's going to keep the audience amused and happy for a long time, for months to come. And you put it out there, and 2 days later, someone gets in touch to say they've finished it. You know, when are you doing an update? And when that sort of stuff starts coming in, you think, well, yeah, we've got an audience, they clearly like it. We need to do updates. So you do more and more features, and you listen to what the players are saying about the game. You look at analytics, you look at App Store reviews, and yeah, just really sort of study your market and try to understand your players and what they want.
Yeah, that seems like the go-to. Fire the game off, and then it seems like you kind of just started listening to your users as a way to keep that ball rolling downhill, which is awesome to hear. So it sounds like there's a couple of things you've done over that span, which was, you know, understand what content the users are consuming in the game, what they might like. You said a couple other things like looking at reviews and just generally hearing what that audience is saying. So it sounds like there might have been some challenges there. I would love to hear some more about some of the things you have done in the past to try to better understand those users and what they want. And we can maybe get a little bit more into the next steps of what Player Insights is and how that can help you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done as you know, sort of all companies have had any sort of success in mobile have done. We've done a lot of work on analytics. You know, you put events into your games, and you know, the player will get to a certain point in the game, and an analytic event will fire off, and that sort of stuff's really, you know, incredibly useful, incredibly valuable, because you get insights into which levels are tripping people up. You know, how many times they play a day, how long they play for, whether they're looking at this feature or that feature, and you iterate your development based on that. I think the weakness of that, or the, you know, what that doesn't give you is any sense of the kind of emotion the player has as they're going through the game. You can tell on average that people like this part of the game, and on average they find this part difficult, but they are quite crude averages, and you sort of speculate that if they're perhaps slow to get through something, maybe they're frustrated, but actually that's not necessarily true. They might like being, you know, challenged, and we've not had tools to really do anything with that before. We've looked at you know, App Store reviews, but they can be quite one-dimensional. They can be you know, 5-star fantastic game, which is wonderful to see, but it doesn't really tell you anything. Or 1-star, I thought it was awful, and again, it doesn't really tell you anything. So you know, the player insight system from Tap Research has been really useful to be able to ask our players questions and get a sort of sense of how they're feeling, and also, whilst, you know, you can see averages about how players are reacting to something, that doesn't tell you, you know, there might be a portion of the audience that are just not interacting with it at all, or are really struggling, and actually asking questions, I think, is a good way to get those answers.
Yeah, yeah, analytics is definitely powerful. As you mentioned, it's something that every game developer can relate to, having as much data about the game as possible, but really understanding the sentiment of the player, what they think, and have them have a channel to verbalize it has always been tough, right? We've heard anecdotes from partners using Google Forms and putting 1 million people into a Google form and crashing that, or paying a lot of money to use a SurveyMonkey link that they then have to build into the game that pushes the user out of the game, or a type form or something like that. So there's a lot of tools out there, but it's kind of left to the developer to hodgepodge together. And I think that's why we went ahead and built what we're calling Player Insights. There was a lot of partners requesting the ability to use our survey tool that we'd already had developed to engage their users, talk to them, understand them, kind of go through the motions of, we built this thing, we have the analytics, what else can we learn, and how else can we refine the process, maybe create specific loops for those users. There's a ton of different use cases that lend itself to player insights. So I know that we've gone through a couple. I don't know if you want to talk about them specifically. There's things like NPS, which I think were brand new to you, and then there was just the idea of we wanted to learn a thing, and so we built a specific survey for that. I think there was a couple of good learnings we talked about in that last survey we run. So I don't know if you wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, NPS was a new concept to me till quite recently, and you know, basically taking a gauge of how your users are, you know, whether they feel positive or negative against the game, and that's been really useful. We've been running those constantly, so you get a gauge of that sort of positivity against the game, and then you iterate on the game and you resample it. So that's something just to do constantly. But the other thing, you know, what we found sort of powerful about player insights is just how quickly and easily it is to launch things. You know, we've had some, you know, one example is we added some new sort of booster power-ups to our picture cross game, and you know, we developed them, we put them out there, and the analytics said people were interacting with them. But as a new feature, we didn't really have any sense whether the analytics were telling us, you know, X percentage of people were interacting with them, and we didn't know whether that was good or not. You know, should we be expecting almost everyone to interact with them, or is it something that people just, you know, opt into? And we launched a survey, you know, very quickly. You throw together 10 questions or so. You say that you want, you know, whatever 300 people to take the survey and launch, and you know, within a few hours you have your answers. And we were asking you know, various questions around these boosters and power-ups, and what was quite surprising is you know, some of our players simply didn't know what they were. They you know, didn't know what these things were, and it kind of told us that the way we were introducing these things was, you know, could have been finessed. We thought it was fairly obvious, the proposal, but clearly not. So that sort of thing is really useful.
Yeah, it was a good little learning point that we didn't even think would be uncovered. And there's a ton of things we can do with it that I don't think we've even thought of doing yet. There's you know, optimizing your app store, asking your current users to like better define what the messaging or creative should be that would lead them to a click. There's going through game persona development, just understanding who your gamers are, so that if you're going to do UA on the other side, you know who that persona is, and it can help make targeting a little bit easier. Or concept testing, as we talked about, right? You're going to build a new feature, a new boost, whatever it might be. You can actually get that in front of your users ahead of time before you put resources against it. And then from there, understand, is this like a good thing that the users are going to like, or is it going to be something that they're not going to understand and we need to tweak? And you can do all that before it even goes out. And then with the NPS, you can track how that actually resulted, right? You got a solid score, you introduce a new feature, it goes up, it goes down. That ultimately tells you how your users are going to feel about your game. And just a quick note for our viewers, NPS is Net Promoter Score. And it's a simple survey, 2 questions, and it's basically just asking them what they think about the game and if they would recommend it to a fellow person to play. So it's a simple, easy survey, but helps give you an idea of what they think. So sorry, Pete, I think you had a quick little.
Yeah, I was going to say, with all that stuff, the you know, engaging your users and asking them, you know, questions ahead of launching a feature. You know, it's incredibly valuable to get that sort of feedback. But I think the other thing that's possibly slightly overlooked, when you're running a game as a service, and your players are free-to-play users, and you know, there are millions of potential customers out there, and you're getting, you know, thousands or even tens of thousands of downloads per day, that there can be a sense from the user that they're they're not necessarily valued or they're or listened to. And I think this is a great tool to engage your users, to make them feel that their opinion on the game matters. If you've had someone who's been playing your game for sort of 3 years, it's personal to them. It's part of, almost certainly part of their daily routine. They'll whatever play over breakfast or on the commute, and day in, day out. And knowing that their opinion matters, I think, is a great way to engage people. We have a help system in our game, where people, if they've got problems, they can get in touch. But generally, they only get in touch if they've got problems. And of course, they like to be listened to and know that there's a real person responding to them. But getting ahead of that and actually asking their opinion about features before you even launch them, I think is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, it's a good point you brought up. We actually ran a survey, I want to say 6 months ago, asking users this very same thing when we were going to put resources into building player insights. We thought, why not ask users if this is something that would help with retention, in that if they were able to give their opinions and help influence the direction of the game that they love it and play every day, would they stick around even more, play more, play longer, that sort of stuff. And yeah, the results were just as you mentioned. People, it was a resounding yes of, if I was able to give feedback, then I of course would continue to play this game, because now I'm a part of that company. This is just going to be a thing for me forever. So that's a great point to bring up. Not being valued and not having a voice, and drastically changing that to a platform where it's easy to let them have a voice is immensely powerful. Yeah, absolutely. So we got you into the beta of Player Insights several months ago. We've ran a bunch of different surveys. How do you see using our solution kind of moving into the next 6, 12, 18 months of Supersonic? Are there things you can already see in the future? Are there products that maybe you're testing that this tool can help you with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the early tests we did on in the early beta, that there were some features in the product that weren't there that would have been good to have. For instance, branches within the surveys where you can. The early versions we would ask a question, and on a given answer it would be survey finished. Whereas now we can branch and ask different questions depending on those answers, so it makes it more powerful. I think all of those things that we've spoken about, I think we absolutely will be sampling our audience for features going forward. We'll be sampling our audience on new features and how they react to them, their sort of emotive state around those features. I think it's a tool that we'll just use more and more going forward.
That's great. Yeah, branching. That was a huge one. Basically just logic to help the flow of a user inside of a survey, as you mentioned. Instead of just ending it for a specific person, maybe that person can give you feedback on something else in a survey. And we definitely took a lot of feedback during that beta period, especially some that you had given, to refine and add those new features to our survey tool. And we're going to continue to do that. We've got a crack team back here working on the Player Insights tool, and we've got a lot of things to still build into it. But as a core, I think it works very, very well, and that was a fundamental piece of it. One of the things I had talked to you about, I think a few months ago, was also using it just to understand or augment some of those analytics that we talked about. You get analytics to see what people like in the game, but one of the questions was, do people like the hard puzzles, right? As you mentioned, it might take more time. And so we had fired up a quick survey, or we were talking about firing up a quick survey just to understand that. I was wondering if there's any other little points like that, or anything new maybe that you have coming down the pipe that we could maybe use our survey tool to help you with.
Yeah, I mean, that survey was really useful. I think mobile is something, if people consume in a sort of very snacky way, they'll come in and they'll do a 5-minute session or whatever, you know, as they're sitting on the bus or whatever. And I think we've at times thought the way to better serve that audience is making simpler things, you know, things that don't necessarily push you. And we did do some surveys on the kind of puzzles people wanted, and it was quite surprising that that there was quite a positive reaction to the harder puzzles. So that was definitely something to take away from it. And in fact, we've recently launched a follow-up to our sort of Picture Cross product, Picture Cross Color, and it features harder puzzles. And we were worried during development that the game's just naturally harder, and we were worried that, you know, is this going to adversely affect it? And actually having surveys to say no, we want harder puzzles was a real sort of relief, and it's actually bearing out. You know, the game's doing well with these harder puzzles.
It's funny, yeah. My wife loves those color ones. She beat the game, and then she's like, these color ones, I tell them we need more. I'm like, don't worry, we'll get there.
Those more coming.
Yeah, that's great. I think that was it for some of the questions, unless you had anything else you kind of wanted to share. I know we kind of glazed over some of the other things. You specifically, I think there was a big event for you guys where Miniclip came in and made an investment in you. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit, or how that's changing things at Supersonic.
Yeah, I mean, we were independent for a long time, and you know, quite fiercely independent in that we were you know, getting successful and getting you know, bigger and making good profits, and you know, it really gives you a sort of confidence boost that you're doing the right thing. But we've known Miniclip for maybe 5-6 years, and, you know, spoke to them on and off in that time, and we got into discussions about them acquiring us about a year ago, and actually slightly more, about maybe 14 months ago. And the time seemed right for us. It seemed that we'd reached a level of success that we were really pleased with and really proud of, but we had ambitions to go on further. And you know, we thought being part of a bigger group with all the expertise that larger group brings could really spur us on. So you know, it's exciting. We've become part of Miniclip. We're rebranded to puzzling.com. We're operating as a, you know, a sort of semi-independent subsidiary within Miniclip. We sort of do our own thing, but also you know, obviously work very closely with them and lean on their resources and expertise. And I think it's going really well. I think we've got big ambitions, and they're absolutely going to help us realize them. So it's great.
That's awesome. We know we work pretty closely with Miniclip as well, and so one of the big things they'd asked us for was getting in on the brand sales side and understanding brand affinity and that sort of stuff. So who knows? Maybe some of that might make it to your side of the business as well, with things moving forward. So appreciate you sharing. I don't know if we have any questions from outside. Would love to take a couple minutes and go through those if there are any.
Thank you, Brian and Pete. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. For those of you who have not yet submitted your questions, just as a reminder, be sure to type them into the question box located in the control panel of your GoToWebinar screen, and we'll start addressing them now. It looks like we have a few that just came in. The first one is for Pete. Are there any other insights you discovered about your players using player insights by Tap Research that might have surprised you, or that you would have never been able to normally get to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably touched on a couple of them earlier, but I think you know, we were surprised that people were leaning towards more difficult puzzles. That was definitely not what I expected. We were surprised that a significant part of our audience just didn't understand those new boosters and power-ups I was talking about. You know, we thought it was obvious. You know, our years of sort of game design and experience, we thought we'd designed something that was obvious, and for a significant part of our audience, it wasn't. So it's nice to know these things, nice to find these things out.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Well, I feel like I do that all the time too, where I'm like, no, it's completely obvious, and then it's not for some people. They just
I mean, I think that as a game designer, you use, you know, all your experience and your sort of intuition on things, but I think sometimes you can be too close to things. You know, you can work with things for months, and you think because you've worked with them for months, you just think it's obvious, and then your players tell you it's not. You know, it's one of the reasons I like mobile so much. In my sort of old life, when we made console games, you would develop the game and you'd publish it, and that would be it. There would be no going back. There'd be no tweaking it. And mobile, you can constantly tweak it and constantly make it better. And you know, we've been largely guided by analytics so far to do that. And analytics are a fantastic tool, but I think player insights really sort of augments that and gives you another sort of nuanced slant on it.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Pete.
Thank you, Pete. It looks like we have a second question for you, Pete. Are there any other tips or recommendations you have for other game developers who are looking to acquire and retain new players?
So we've launched a lot of games over the years, maybe 15, maybe even approaching 20 games. And one of the things you find is it can actually be quite a fine line between success and failure. You know, for instance, if your player does X many puzzles a day, or spends X many minutes in the game, and their, you know, propensity to turn up again tomorrow is Y, and you do all those sort of sums, and it adds up to a certain level of retention. It can be a fine line between that being enough to sustain the game, or that being enough, you know, for it to fizzle out. And I think the other thing about the mobile business, that balance is you get downloads, you know, through sort of organic discovery, or, you know, sort of social media, or for us, and I think for many publishers, increasingly paid user acquisition. And if you're paying to run adverts which result in people downloading your game, and that cost to download to you know, acquire a user outweighs what you earn from them, obviously you don't have a business. And that fine line can be, you know, it can be a really, really fine line. I think tips I would say was develop and launch and analyze and repeat endlessly. And when you get something that looks like it's got some traction, that your users like it and are enjoying it, try to learn, you know, from that, and try to work out how to make them play more, and to, you know, an extra 30 seconds every session, or an extra 5 minutes every day, or slightly more likely to come back tomorrow. And I think you know, use your skill and your intuition and your creativity to make something wonderful, but look at the numbers and the feedback as well, and get feedback from wherever you can, because you know, it will surprise you, I think.
Thank you. That was great. And looks like we have one last question that just came in, and this one is for Brian. Is there a particular type of game developer that Player Insights is tailored for, or that will benefit from using it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's all games. There is no specific game type that can benefit from Player Insights. I think it's a tool designed for everyone, meant to be easy to use, where you can elicit feedback. In fact, it might even be great for non-games. Anybody in the mobile space, I think, can benefit from feedback, because to Pete's example, these apps and games in the space, I think, operate on similar models, where it might be a very, very thin line, but they're acquiring users to do a thing, whether it's edit a photo or actually do a puzzle. And if you can get feedback from them and help refine your product and service, then I think everyone can benefit from it. The tool set is meant to be open and easy to use, and through multiple different scenarios too. So hopefully it answers that question. But but glad to dive in further.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian, for that. It looks like we've covered all of our questions at this point. I wanted to thank everyone again for attending our session today. We appreciate you being here. If you have not already done so, please be sure to visit tapresearch.com for more information about our Player Insights solution, and follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date about our upcoming releases and events. We also have Pete and Brian's contact information now displayed on the screen. If you have any specific questions for either of them, please feel free to reach out to them using the contact information on your screen. And if you would like to speak with one of our Insights experts to learn more about our Player Insights solution, be sure to contact us through our website. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.